Okay, can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you guys hear me? Can you see me? Okay, so y'all can hear. You're good. Okay, so then we're going to keep moving on. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but good evening. Welcome. I hope you guys have had a good Monday. So let us get off and running. Let me share my screen with you. Everybody should see that. Does everybody see the Fiveable screen? Perfect. We all can see, we all can hear. So tonight is going to be very particular, okay? I'm not going to be covering the entire essay. I'm only going to be covering what would be your introductory paragraph, your thesis, and your contextualization. Because when I teach this to my students, to me, it seems like that if you can get this paragraph down, you're setting yourself up to get as high a score as possible in the rest of the points, okay? And so we're going to cover thesis writing, how to write a thesis, as well as how to write a contextualization, and what order you should be doing it in. Okay. I do want to preface this with that I am teaching you the way that I teach my students. That does not mean the way you've been taught by your teacher is wrong. It doesn't mean that the way I'm teaching you is wrong. It's another way for you to write it. Again, this will be for both DBQ and LEQ. Okay. Because the setup is almost identical if you really think about it. Okay. The biggest difference between a DBQ and an LEQ is going to be the documents, right? So I do teach AP European History and AP World History. I try to include as much for APUSH here as possible, but it's going to be relevant for APUSH, even if I don't give you a lot of content for that, okay? Just a reminder, you do have quite a bit of reviews going on this week. For APUSH, we've got Wednesday, the American Revolution, and Friday, you've got a DBQ practice on, no, sorry, Thursday, you've got using dates as an exam strategy. For WAP, Wednesday, you have period 3, sorry, that's Euro, period 3 and 4 review, and then Friday is imperialism. And then there are also reviews Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for Euro and World and APUSH. So remember to follow Think Fiveable on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And hopefully you do not feel like this, that you have no idea what you're doing. Hopefully you do have something, right? Because I think that really if you can get this down, the rest of it's just going to fall into place for you. So with that being said, what do we do first, right? Kids ask me this all the time. Do I write my thesis first? Do I write my contextualization first? Do I need to start in the middle of it? Like, where do I do this? There technically is no right or wrong way to start your essays, except for one thing, okay? Your thesis statement can only be in your first paragraph and your last paragraph. That's it, okay? So what you need to decide though here is, which do you want to write first? I have my students write context and then thesis. I think it kind of makes the flow better because you are giving your reader, that person in, I think we're in Kansas City now when we read, an understanding of this is what's going on around the topic. Now your thesis is going to be your answer to the topic, okay? Really what this should be is a roadmap to your reader to say, this is what I'm going to write about. Follow along with me, and I'm going to take you on a journey. Okay. With that being said, it's not about length either. Okay. Don't think that you have to fill up so many pages to get a 5, or you have to fill up so many pages to get a 4. We have read things that are a 2-page DBQ, and I've seen it get 2 or 3 points. I've read a 10-page LEQ that got nothing. Right? It really isn't about length. It's about answering the question and the content that you put in there. Okay. So Contextualization is what I'm going to start with because that's what I have my kids do. All right. What contextualization is it's drawing connections between different events like World War I, World War II, or different time periods. If you're doing world history, you know the classical time period and the post-classical time period. US history, colonialization, and constitutional time period. What we want you to do is we want you to stop thinking of history as it being event A, it happens. So if event A is the Revolutionary War, once the revolution is over, it no longer affects anything down the road. That we don't want you to think like that anymore. We want you to see that the revolution has a lasting impact on events down the road, 10, 20, sometimes even 50 years down the road. The purpose of this is to basically get you to kind of think like, I say, should I put here the Star Wars? Think like that, okay? Because a lot of people don't know, a little digression, that episode 4 was not what he wanted to start with. He wanted to start with episode 1 that almost everybody hates. But the technology wasn't good enough. So how does he get us all caught up on what happened in episodes 1 through 3? He has that rolling screen that tells us, okay, here's what happened prior to Star Wars Episode 4 taking place. That's what your contextualization is. It's telling your reader, here's what happened before the event that the DBQ or the LEQ asked me to write about. Let me make sure you understand why I'm going to write what I'm going to write about, okay? So this is what I give my students, okay? I have them write this chart on their paper. And what I do is I let them kind of look at it from this kind of point of view. You can pick one of two ways to do contextualization, okay? If you go along the x-axis, you're going along time-wise. So let's say our topic is going to be Civil War, okay? So you can tell me in your contextualization what happened about 50 years beforehand or 50 years afterwards. Or if you're really ambitious and you want to, you can tell us both, before and after, okay? The other thing that you can do, and this is more for Euro world history, I'm not so much sure about a push, so ask your teachers. You stay in the time period that the topic is in, and you go on a global scale or a regional scale. So if we're going to do a topic on, let's say, the French Revolution, we could do a global scale and talk about the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, all the Latin American revolutions. And that kind of gives your reader an understanding that you, A, know what's going on in history. B, that you can tie these events together to see why one affected the other. And most importantly, it helps you keep in your mind where you want to go with your essay. Okay, so I did write out one as an example here. I wrote it out and I took a picture of it. So hopefully you can see this. Okay, I took this from, I think it was in a released AP Euro exam on the student website from College Board. And the topic for the DBQ that year was evaluate the extent to which the experience of war altered the lives of European women during the First World War and its immediate aftermath. So there's a couple of things that we need to know right off the bat here. One, what's the historical thinking skill? There are some key words about what the historical thinking skill are, okay? Altered is a really good word to know about if it's CCOT, change in continuity. Similarities, differences, those are pretty easy to understand. What are the after effects? What led up to? That could be cause and effect. But also, what is the topic here? A lot of students could get lost a little bit because this is kind of wordy, okay? I would say this is a wordy prompt in my opinion, but I don't work for College Board, so what do I know? A lot of kids, I would think, would get lost in where they just see European women during First World War. They might miss how they want you to say altered the lives of, which is a very big key thing here. You have to tell us how their lives changed, okay? You can tell us how it stayed the same, and you should, but you have to tell us how their lives changed, all right? Now, I do have one caveat to the 50-year time period thing. This is really dependent upon how the topic is worded. In this case, the First World War and its immediate aftermath, that's really from 1914 to about 1939, in my opinion. Okay, it's a very specific time period. If it was to say the Reformation, that's not a specific time period. All right, we might say that it started in 1517. You could make an argument it started earlier with previous reformers, but some people would say it ends in 1648. Others would say it's still ongoing because of the fact we've got all of these new Protestant denominations that come up in different centuries. So with that being said, I think what you should do is you need to really pay attention to the topic. If it's a very specific topic, 50 years before, 50 years after. If it's a topic that's more on like a time period, you can go up to a century before, a century after. Now, world history, we've got a special case for us because we span so much time. Okay. A couple of years ago, there was the essay that was about on the DBQ, you know, that, or I think it was the long essay, sorry, comparing the spread of Buddhism to the spread of Christianity. That's a long time. Like, that's a massive amount of time. That's hundreds upon hundreds of years. So there, what you should be doing when you're looking at contextualization is not looking so much at the time is what I would recommend. You are going to want to follow along the y-axis, which is you're going to look at what's going on in just different parts of the world at the same time as these religions spreading, and kind of give a context that way, because then what you can do is you can take that and say, well, these events are happening, so this is how it affected the spread. Okay. So you see here on my chart that I made, I tried to throw in US history again, guys. I'm not going to lie, I just don't remember enough of it. So there might be some things here that are a little wonky. I apologize. Euro and world are my strengths. So in the center is the topic that I gave you guys, World War I. Okay. On the x-axis, what I did is I wrote events that you could talk about in your contextualization. Going back about 50 years, the start of the Second Industrial Revolution, imperialism, Franco-Prussian War, Italian unification. Going forward, I went as far as the Great Depression. Not really 50 years, and the reason I stopped there is because of the prompt saying it's immediate aftermath. Okay, so that way, if I wanted to, I can pick out one, two, couple events here and give the context of why women's life is changing. Or what I can do is I can go along the y-axis, which is what's going on in a global scale, not just World War I, but like in general. And so we know at World War I, at the beginning, America extremely isolated. That has an effect on women's rights. Okay. America was also expansionist in Latin America. You have the opening of the Panama Canal. Work is changing. Henry Ford introduced the 8-hour workday and a $5 minimum wage, which is amazing considering we're only at $7.25 100 years later. But I digress. Other world events, things like Pope Benedict XV is named Pope. You have the Spanish flu, first seen in Kansas. While that is during the World War I timeframe, the reason why I included it here as a world event and not part of World War I, because of the amount of death that happens due to that and its effects on societies in like the Oceania region and in Asia. And then like you've got some more Eurocentric events. We got Sinn Féin wins a landslide election in Ireland. Elections are a really good way to look at women's participation in life, civic life, political or economic life, home life, things like that. So here's some examples of contextualization that I wrote based off the prompt. All right, on your left, these are contextualizations that not necessarily are wrong, but they're just really weak. Okay, so the lives of women were altered by the events of World War I and beyond. That's what I like to tell my students is the so what? Why did you write this? Like, we knew that. Why was it so important to you to put this on paper? If you want to say something like that, you don't ever want your reader to be like, so what? Like, we knew this. Okay. You always want your reader to go, okay, these kids know. All right, they're good. Another example of a weak actually wrong contextualization is women were relegated to the role of provider by the events of World War I after the London Blitz by the Germans and destruction of the city. Guys, you've got to make sure that you stay within the correct time period. Okay. You can't just talk about what you think is there. You've got to make sure you read that topic very, very closely. All right. It's specifically said World War I and its immediate aftermath. The London Blitz, that's in World War II. We would not count that. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't count that. Okay. On the right-hand side is what I would say is a strong context. Okay. And so prior to the start of World War I, women had been chiefly relegated to domesticity, while the responsibility for providing was placed on the shoulders of men. With the advent of the war, women found themselves in a new position along the factory line, working with heavy machinery that began in the Second Industrial Revolution. As the war came to a close, women increased in earnest the agitation for equal rights, fueled by the war's destructive nature and a desire to not be relegated back to the home. You don't have to write a context that's that long, okay? It doesn't even have to be that wordy. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are drawing those connections, again, between the events and making sure that everyone is understanding that you can see that event A is event B to event C to event D, okay? And so thesis statements from there, because I would do your thesis after your contextualization. The thesis statement has an actual purpose, okay? It's not just, can we see if you can write a thesis statement? All right, a lot of my kids will be like, I think you just make us do this because you want us to see if we can do it. It's not, all right? Your thesis statement, it has a purpose, which is to help your reader know what you are going to write about, okay? Think about when you've read a book and you're reading a book and you're reading the first couple of pages and you're trying to figure out what the story is about, okay? And the authors never told you yet because they just dropped you off in the middle. When you don't have a thesis in your paper, that's kind of what it's like for us. We get dropped in the middle of your paper and we're having to figure out, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about this? Okay. Most importantly is it's going to help you with a logical flow of your DBQ or LEQ. Okay. Rather than do what I call the spaghetti method, just throw everything at the wall, right? You want to make sure you're putting pen to paper with what's really going to matter and help you get a point. Okay. Again, I cannot stress enough here. Your thesis can only be in the introductory paragraph and the conclusion paragraph. Anywhere else, we cannot give you that point. And please, please, please make this easy for your reader. Write paragraphs. Okay. Don't just do one big old block essay. Separate in paragraphs. Okay. And then also important, your thesis has to be relevant to the prompt. Okay. If your prompt is about World War I or it's about the First Industrial Revolution and you're writing about the space age, that's not relevant. Okay. That doesn't mean you won't be able to get other points, but it's going to be harder. Okay. So for me, this is what we're looking at with a good thesis. Okay. It answers, it does not restate the prompt. Okay. It is going to make sure that the person is able to follow along and know what you're going to be talking about. It provides a roadmap to your reader, letting them know that your paragraphs are going to be about these topics. And it also provides you with mini theses for your body paragraphs. Okay. You can lift one of those topics from your thesis and move it into a topic sentence for a body paragraph. And lo and behold, you now have what you're going to be writing about rather than trying to figure it out as you go along. Okay. So on the left-hand side here, you've got what I would call a simple thesis. Okay. A simple thesis, it repeats the prompt. It really doesn't provide me as a reader an understanding of where you are going with your essay. It's really only saying, okay, you can read the prompt. Okay. It also makes it harder for you, okay, for you to do that complex analysis. Right? I'm sure most of you have heard about the unicorn point. right? Complexity. It's a unicorn point for a reason, okay? Because it's hard to do. Well, if you use a simple thesis, that makes it even harder, right? Oftentimes when we see simple thesis statements, they're also very repetitious. When you write a thesis statement in your introductory paragraph, you should write your thesis statement again in your concluding paragraph. Now, what I tell my students is that you're not going to repeat the same thesis. What you're going to do is you're going to reword your thesis. Okay, very important that you pay attention to that. Do not repeat your thesis. And the reason I tell my students this is because let's say you write your thesis in your introductory paragraph and you think it's awesome. It might be, but if your reader doesn't get what you're saying, they're not going to give you a point. We can go to your concluding paragraph. And if your thesis is there in a way that we can give you a point, you just got your point. But if you just rewrote the exact same thesis you put in your introductory paragraph, we can't give you that point. So again, you don't want to rewrite, you want to reword your thesis. So you have it in your introductory paragraph and your concluding paragraph. So I got an example here, right? Women experienced a lot of bad things during the time of World War I and afterwards. Again, this is the so what? Like, why did you put that on paper? Yes, they experienced bad things. Okay, but what does bad things mean? All right, your definition of bad and my definition of bad might not be the same thing. So with this thesis, it really doesn't actually answer the prompt because bad is so subjective. It doesn't tell us how that experience changed. Okay. And when you say good or bad or great or awful or very non-committal terms like that, as a reader, what we're going to start going is, does this student really know what's going on? Do they actually understand what the prompt is asking? And really, I would say you want to shy away from as much as possible as using a simple thesis, okay? That brings in what is known as the complex split thesis. This is where not only are you answering the prompt, but you are not repeating the prompt, okay? What you're doing is that you are saying, I've read it. I understand what you're asking. Now here's what the answer is. I'm going to show you the answer by talking about these things. A complex split thesis, also, one thing that I tell my students is a good idea is to remember what's known as the rule of three. Okay, the rule of three is you're going to talk about these three topics in your body paragraphs. Okay, but most importantly, a complex split thesis sets you up to get that unicorn point, complexity. All right, so let's look at the example that I have here. Although women remained mainly confined to the home, women experienced greater access to working opportunities, political access through the suffrage movement, and increased educational opportunities. So the answer that I gave the reader here, I'm showing not just the change, okay, I also gave them a continuity, all right? And I can expand upon that continuity as we go along. Secondly, I've got three topics I'm going to write about. My first topic is going to be economics because it's talking about working. My second topic is going to be politics. So I'm talking about the suffrage movement. And my third topic, it's education. So body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, and body paragraph 3. You can use that as a really good roadmap for your reader and for you, okay? It is for readers' convenience. I fully will say that's true, but this is also more of what a college professor is going to be looking for as well, okay? When you write for college, your college professor doesn't want to have to wade through all of the flowery speech that you put in there to meet a word count, okay? They want you to answer the question and get to the point. So this is the formula of what's known as a complex thesis formula, okay? You've got two ways to do it. You can do X, period, however, A, B, and C, therefore Y. I'm not a fan of that one. I think it's really difficult because you are splitting your thesis into multiple sentences, okay? So what I tell my students is to do the other one. Although X, Y, because of A, B, C. So although women were still relatively confined to the home, they did get more access to, working experience, political access and suffrage, and et cetera. That type of thesis statement is going to set you up again for that complexity. All right. Because if you use this thesis, you're going to pull out those mini theses and continue to write about them. So here on the left here, this is where I would say this is what you need to do about putting it together. Again, this is my way of telling my students how to write this. It's not saying your teacher was wrong. It's not saying that I am right or they're right. It's just another way for you to look at it, okay? So I always tell my students that this goes in your introductory paragraph. You do contextualization first, and contextualization 3 to 4 sentences. And then you do your thesis, 2 to 3 sentences. The one thing that I'm really harsh on my students about is that writing a paragraph is not 3 sentences or 4 sentences. You are supposed to be writing college level writing here, okay? And so you should be writing an actual paragraph, 5 to 7 sentences. We're not going to grade you on that at the reading, but what we are going to do is we're going to be looking for that complexity issue. And the shorter it is, the harder that is to find, okay? If you do your contextualization and your thesis in the introductory paragraph like this, you are setting yourself up for 2 points automatically. That's 1/3 of your grade for both DBQ and LEQ, okay? I'm going to go back to the XYZ ABC thing again, so hold on, because I'm going to show you it in just a second, all put together, all right? On the right-hand side, why do I tell you guys to put it this way? Well, one, again, I'm going to repeat it for another time. Do not leave your reader going, so what, all right? You don't want your reader going, give me more. You got to go further, okay? You don't want us to go, wait, what does he mean? What does she mean? What are they trying to tell me? You want it to be as clear and concise as possible, okay? Second, when you set it up this way, you're helping yourself and your brain organize before you write that entire essay. Okay, so many times with my own students do I see them, and you have that 15-minute reading time for the DBQ, and I tell my kids to take 5 minutes for the LEQ. They don't, and they just start writing, and they're writing, and they're writing, and they're writing, and they're writing. And when I go and I read it, I'm like, I don't get it. There's no flow. There's no connections. It's like what I call the spaghetti argument. You don't take spaghetti and throw it at a wall to see what sticks. Because if you know a lot about World War I, but it's not relevant to the topic, why are you telling me? What are you hoping to gain out of that? Okay. And most importantly, again, with the whole write in paragraphs, not as a whole chunk, don't make your reader hunt. Make it easy for them to know, okay, this is my context because I know what's going on. I'm connecting these time periods and these events. This is my thesis because I'm going to tell you about A, B, and C. All right. If you make it easier on us, it's easier for us to understand what you're trying to say. Okay. And that's really what I'm trying to get across here is the easier you make it, the easier it is for us to understand what you want and to give you the points that you deserve. Okay. We don't do what's known as subtractive grading, right? Where we look for what you do wrong. We do additive grading, where we're looking to see what you did right. And by doing that, if it's all in this nice, neat, I don't want to say package, right? It's easier for us to do that. But when you do that spaghetti, everything at the wall, we've got to wade through all that spaghetti to find those things that are correct, okay? So this is the whole thing all put together, all right? On your left-hand side, I've got that question again, all right? To evaluate the extent to which the experience of war altered the lives of European women during the First World War and its immediate aftermath, okay? When we combine this contextualization and thesis into this strong paragraph, you're giving me as a reader this perfect understanding of where you're going, what you're going to be talking about. I do not need to second guess anything. And again, you're giving yourself mini thesis for each of your body paragraphs. Okay, so look at it here on the right. This is the whole thing put together. Prior to the start of World War I, women had been chiefly relegated to domesticity, while the responsibility for providing was placed on the shoulders of men. With the advent of the war, women found themselves in a new position along the factory line, working with heavy machinery that began in the Second Industrial Revolution. As the war came to a close, women increased in earnest the agitation for equal rights, fueled by the war's destructive nature and a desire to not be relegated back to the home. So that's my contextualization. I've connected previous history to the events of World War I and where they're going. Although women remained mainly confined to the home, women experienced greater access to working opportunities, political access through suffrage movement, and increased educational opportunities. So my thesis, I have my although X. My X in this case, or the counter argument, is that women still basically stayed at home, all right? My Y in this case is that there is change, all right? And here's the change. The change is greater working or greater economic opportunities, greater political opportunities, and greater education opportunities. And that's my A, B, and C, okay? So by following it this way, this is what you can do with your Y, all right? That counter argument. This is where it gets to be very, I guess we're a lot of teachers, we have a lot of different ideas on how to do this. No one really is right, no one's really wrong. I personally have one that I like, which is doing it at the end. I have seen it where it's done other ways. The main other way that I've seen it is where you actually use your counter argument, your why, in each of your body paragraphs. So if your first body paragraph is about economics, okay, you're going to talk and tell me about that A, all the things that changed for women in economics. But then you're going to tell me, yeah, these things changed, but look at all the things in economics that stayed the same. Okay, you're going to tell me, you know, that if a woman gets a job, she still had to have her husband on a bank account. If a woman gets, you know, a secretarial job, the minute she got married, she had to leave. Okay, that's one way to do your counter argument. Okay, in the same paragraph as your A, and then your B, and then your C. Your other way of doing your Y or your counter argument is to do it in your second to last paragraph. Okay, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, and body paragraph 3. You've told me all the things that changed. In body paragraph 4, now you're going to tell me this all happened, but look at everything that didn't happen that way. And by doing that, either way, body paragraph 4 or throughout the 3 body paragraphs, you are helping to set yourself up for the unicorn point and the historical thinking skill. Okay. So that's what I want to cover with you guys. I see there's a lot of talk here on the right, and then there's a lot of questions. So I'm going to get to those questions. Please keep asking them if you have them. I will try to answer as many of them as possible. The key thing here to remember, again, guys, is there's no right or wrong way. We just all have different ways. We tend to use the same words. But really, this is what I feel will help you set up the best and strongest essay for you if you can get your context and your thesis correct in that first statement, in that first paragraph. All right. So let's get to the questions. What is the most productive way to establish the relevance of your context to your thesis? Carrera, that is a great question. What I would say is that when you are talking about your context, you need to make sure that your context is going to be not just relevant to the thesis, but to the topic. Because if your thesis is answering the topic, then the context should be relevant to both. So again, my example, you know, you've got the Second Industrial Revolution and you're talking about the space race. The relevancy there, you could make it a stretch, but I would not say that it would be a good one because why? All right, what is the point of saying that the space race is context for the Second Industrial Revolution? Okay. I hope that answers that question. Let me know if it did or it didn't. I can go more in depth if you want. So for the DBQ, how do we figure out how to use the docs to support the argument without hyperventilating about the time? Well, Lily, first, you've got time, all right? You do, I promise. Take a breath. It'll be okay. We're not really covering that tonight, but what I will give you the answer is that when you are using the documents and you're doing HIPPO, right? It's not about HIPP. Pick one and use that. You're going to do that for all 7 documents. Okay, you don't need to do HIPP for all 7 documents. Okay, So I hope that helps. Gabby here's got some great advice. It would be that after reading each document, write the main point. Good idea. Then when you're setting up your paragraphs, you can see the main arguments of each document. This allows you to put everything together faster without freaking out. Gabby, that is a great answer. I really like it. I see a lot of chatter here about the length. Guys, there is no set length. If you look at the rubrics for the DBQ and the LEQ, neither of them talk about length. So you can do 3 paragraphs, you can do 4 paragraphs. I've seen a DBQ that was like 15 paragraphs, okay? It's about answering the question, and it's about making sure that you hit the points that are required on the rubric, okay? If you can do that in 3 paragraphs, that's great. If you can do it in 4 paragraphs, that's great. It's not about length, okay? So just keep that in the back of your mind. It is about making sure that you answer the question and the rubric that it is given to you. Okay. So what are the most common mistakes students make that causes them to miss the point for context and the point for thesis? Mr. Garcia, that is a really good question. So I would say from my experience, okay, that when I see context, I see kids trying to what I call double dip. Okay, so you know how in DBQ you have contextualization with documents. Your contextualization with a document can't be the same as a contextualization for the whole essay. I would say that's what I've seen as the most reason they miss context. For thesis, they just don't answer the question. Or even worse, they don't even write a thesis. Kids, they should always attempt a thesis in the introductory paragraph and in a concluding paragraph. Because it's better to attempt it and not get it than to not even attempt it, right? You only miss the shots you never take, right? A general rule, yes, is 4 to 5 paragraphs, guys. But again, try not to think of it that way. Think of it as, have I answered the question? Have I shown all of the points that I need to show? Okay. What are some of the most important things to study in the next week, Emily? That's a really good question. I don't know which course you're looking for AP Euro. I would say French Revolution is a huge one, as well as probably looking at the political developments and religious developments of Europe. And then, I mean, there's so many things in world history. You've got 10,000 years of history. I don't even know where to begin. Really, what I would recommend for you, Lily, is don't try to study everything. Okay, go back to what you know you didn't understand. Right, look at your previous tests, maybe go look at a mock exam and pick out those key things that you really didn't do well on and study those. If you have time afterwards, continue going over and over other things. There's some other teachers in here. I know we've got Miss McFadden. Europe after World War II is a really great answer. Europe between the wars, also a good answer for what else to study. So hopefully that helps. Do the exact years or time spans and geographic area need to be in the thesis to get the thesis points, Lucia? I think you're confusing thesis with context here. I'm not sure. If I'm understand you correctly, if you mean like if it's talking about World War I, do I need to say women in World War I and afterwards? Not necessarily, no. It makes it easier for the person to understand. You could just say that women experience a greater access to education and political rights and economics, but at the same time, you also don't want to be too vague. Okay, you want to be specific. Mr. Garcia, also, that's another thing that kids don't do. They're not specific enough. They're very vague. So the more specific you can be is the better, I would say. So hopefully that answers your question, Lucia. I would say definitely try to at least be in that time period or that geographic area when you're answering the question with your thesis, okay? So for the DBQ, how to scale the documents with each other, how to put them with each other to write the essay. That's from Fatima. I'm not sure what you mean by scale. Do you mean hip, Fatima? If you can answer that on the right and let me know, that'd be great. To put them with each other. So that's where your thesis comes in, okay? After you've read the documents and you're writing your thesis, when you come up with those 3 categories, the documents naturally fit into categories, okay? And in about 5 years ago, they used to be actually a point that was called grouping. We don't do that anymore, but naturally grouping the documents based off of the topics that they're about. So if you've got two documents that are about economics, they're naturally going to go together, okay? And if you put that in your thesis, now you've got your thesis point, your documents, now let me tie it all together, okay? So you said yes to hipping the documents with each other. I wouldn't say you need to hit them with each other. That certainly helps, but you need to hip it to your thesis, right? Because the whole point of hip is to support an argument, and your thesis is your argument. And so if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to get as strong of an understanding, and your reader might not be able to get as strong of an understanding as what you know, okay? And then Ashley here, she wrote, after reading the documents, go back and look at the prompt and then decide how you want to group the documents with each other. Great advice, right? For example, if the prompt is to analyze response to Buddhism in China, go through and separate the documents based on supported in China and which one against in China. That's a great answer, right? So again, your thesis statement can help you with knowing which documents are going to go together, and then going back after reading the topic and putting them together will help as well. So I hope that helps, Fatima. Let me know. And guys, if you're typing questions on the right, I'm trying to follow along as well as answer in this question box. So if you can put them in the question box, that will help a lot, okay? So next one, what is the best way to learn key concepts? They say it's not memorization, but what is it then? How do you actually understand them? That's a great question. And I struggle with this with my kids too. I wouldn't say that it's not about memorization. Okay, you do need to memorize and understand, when something happened or why something happened. But what I try to get my kids to see is that if I have like an AP Euro, for example, we have something called Kevin Bacon dates. Okay, I can take 1555 and tie that to Napoleon in 1815. If I can do that, that means I understand multiple key concepts along the way, because I'm being able to tie them politically, economically, socially, right? I'm being able to understand how states develop, how organizations develop, things like that. So what I would suggest for you is, if you are in AP Euro, definitely look up the Kevin Bacon dates. That will help you. And see if you can make those connections between the Kevin Bacon dates, all right? If you're in AP World, you're going to want to look at those key concepts and then look at topics that we cover. So like states and identity, if I remember correctly. You want to look at, okay, well, how is that being used in Rome, in China, in classical India, in medieval Europe, in African kingdoms, in the gunpowder empires, okay? That will help you make those connections, all right? Let me know if that helps you, T. I hope it does. Emily, how many sentences does the contextualization intro need to be? Good question. I agree with Lily here. About 4 is correct. You really shouldn't be going beyond that. I mean, you can. That's up to you. But I think 4 is a good number. You can do 3. So I would recommend that 3 to 4. All right. Avni, you asked about Kevin Bacon dates. That is specifically for AP Euro. If you're in AP World or A Push, I have not heard of Kevin Bacon dates for those 2 classes. It's the important dates of AP Euro that they really do need to remember. And they should be able to make connections between all of those dates. And for everybody, if you don't know who Kevin Bacon is, he's an actor in Hollywood that every single person in Hollywood is related to in some form. It's called the Kevin Bacon number. Google it. It's funny. All right. So Jared, for the DBQ, would you recommend directly quoting or inciting the documents? I never, ever, ever recommend quoting for the documents. No. Okay. And here's why. Because when I'm with my own students, all right, in my classroom, when a kid quotes from a document, that does not tell me if they understand the document. That tells me then how to copy. Okay. Paraphrasing the document and explaining what the document means shows me you understand it. Okay. I would say that you definitely should do that. Don't quote from the documents. Your teacher might have told you to do so, and if that works for you, that's fine. Don't change it because I said to change it. I'm just telling you that I would think you really want to be able to make your reader go, hey, this kid understands this document, and I never read him quoting from it once. All right. So I hope that helps, Jared. Let me know in the comments. Sarah, the LEQ and DBQ require you to demonstrate a complex understanding. How do you do that? Sarah, that's the unicorn. I wish I could give you a really great answer for that, a really easy answer for that. I can't. I mean, last year when I was at the read, I thought I understood it. And then I was there and I was reading and I'm like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was. So I would say complex understanding from the way I understand it, all right, is you not only can tell me the historical thinking skill, but you're also telling me the relevancy of why it's important that we know this. Okay, you're making those connections between the topics. Okay, why we need to know what women's lives were like after World War I, or what the spread of Buddhism in China was like, or was Andrew Jackson really such a horrible president, something like that. Because otherwise, what you're doing is you're just answering a question which is a basic yes or no. Okay, again, that is the unicorn point. I really don't think that's going to give you as much as you probably wanted. I wish I could help you more. Remember, this is only like the second year of the complex understanding point. We're still learning what that is. So my recommendation is for whatever AP history course you're in, go to the released student samples and look at the ones that got the complex understanding and why. Okay, that should help you more. I wish I could give you more than that and give you that magic bullet. Alas, I don't have it. Okay. Isabella, where do you need to source in order to get the sourcing point? When you mean where do you need to source, are you talking about where in the essay or like in reference to a specific spot? I'm going to answer with what I think you mean. Okay. And you should source your document right after you use the document. So it is, let's say document 1 was a picture of the picket line of women for women's rights in the 1910s. You say Emily Pankhurst was at the front lines of the women's suffrage movement for equality in England. And then in parentheses, document 1. Okay, that's how I tell my students to source. Another way you can source is the more simple way. In document 1, you can see, or Emily Pankhurst is picketing the, King of England for women's suffrage. Okay. Where in the essay? Well, I mean, if you're using, let's say, 2 documents in your first paragraph, you're going to source it right after you use the documents. If you're using 3 documents in your second paragraph and 1 in your fourth, you source it right after you use the document. So it's not a specific spot in the essay. It's just where you put it in the essay. If you're looking more for like an outline, I would say you have your mini thesis as your topic sentence. You have your document paraphrase as your proof of that thesis. You have your HIP to connect the document to your thesis, and then your explanation of it all together that should hopefully give you the complexity. Other than that, I'm really not sure what else you might mean. Kind of tell me in the comments and let me know. I'll see what I can do to maybe understand a little bit better. All right, so we obviously have some people who are in a funny mood. I am not wearing sunglasses. My glasses have a blue reflective coating on it because I get migraines. So there you go. Not wearing sunglasses. 3, in studying to contextualize, should AP World History students study regions individually across periods or all regions together at each period? Mark, I like my students to study them together in a period because I like them to see how those regions work with each other in that time period. You can study them individually. I think it's a little bit harder to make those connections for contextualization. But again, that's going to be dependent upon the topic, I would say. But me personally, I tell my students, study the regions all together in a time period. It's also how I teach the course. So if that works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, study them individually across the time periods and see if that works for you. So if I am unsure of the topic, what can I do to make it sound as if I do? Sarah, that's a great question. And I hate to say this, but don't write just to write. Write what you know, okay? We as readers, we know when you don't know, especially when we get a kid who's just putting stuff on paper. All right. And remember the spaghetti method. Go do what you can. All right. That's what I would say. And if you don't know the topic, guess what? That's okay. Make an attempt. Okay. Let's say you were given a topic. I'm going to pick up a very obscure thing from European history. What can I pick? Pirates in the Caribbean during the Elizabethan time frame. All right. I don't think that would ever come up. Watch me be wrong this year, but still, you might not know anything about pirates, but you know a little bit about the Elizabethan era, right? You know a little bit about the time period of the Elizabethan era, the 1500s. So write as much as you know about the time period that it's relevant to get the understanding of maybe what they're looking for. I hope that can help. Again, no magic bullet here. Sorry. Emily, again, contextualization, 3 to 4 sentences is what I would say. What are the typical characteristics that low-scoring essays share? High-scoring. Dylan, great question. Low-scoring essays that I would see, there's no continuity between what they're writing about. When I say continuity, I mean like they're jumping all over the place, okay? There is no forethought put into the essay. It's that spaghetti into the wall. And really, they might not even be on topic. Okay, so those are the 3 things I think would be what I see the most for low scoring. For high scoring, again, length. I know I've said this before. It's not about length. I've seen high scoring essays that are only 2 pages or only 3 paragraphs, right? It's about making sure that your answer is concise, and it's also to the point, right? Don't get flowery language. Don't try to show us all of the SAT words you've learned. Get to the point, okay? That's the big thing I'd see in a high-scoring essay. Also, with a high-scoring essay, they show that nuance of the topic, okay? When we talk about women post-World War I, you can just do the big things of suffrage and of economics and education, but you could go into the nuances there of how they really played on each other, of why women going into the factories and working all that time led to them demanding equal access to education in universities to have those jobs that men were coming back and trying to take from them, which led them to then argue that we did these work while you were away. We deserve the right to vote. Like the nuance between the topics, not just boom, boom, boom. All right. I hope that really helps. Dylan, let me know. How do we not run out of time? 100 minutes for 13 essay points doesn't seem like much, especially since you have to read 7 documents. Parker, that's a very good question. So here's what I said, I think, on Saturday when somebody asked a similar question. These are rough drafts. All right, we know they're rough drafts. Okay, you are not turning in a final draft. You're not turning in a paper to a professor that's going to be make or break you. Okay, we really think that what we're looking for is, can you give us the basic flesh of what you would have as a paper if you went further and had more time? Okay, that's why we don't grade you on grammar or syntax or spelling or anything like that, unless it detracts from the essay and we can't understand it. All right. So I would say the biggest thing for you to do is, 1, don't look at the clock so many times. Okay. You really should practice, if you're that worried about the 7 documents, practice hipping the documents over and over again. All right. I would recommend you got Fiveable, there's Albert.io, and then I'm trying to think of some other ones that might be helpful. Let me think about some more. I'm sure if you Google DBQ world history practice, you'll get DBQs that you can look up, and set a timer for yourself, 15 minutes, and practice hipping the documents. Okay. So hopefully that helps. I got faith that you can do this. All right. Don't stress. You've got this. All right. So Lauren, should we write the thesis before or after writing the essay? You should write the thesis after planning it, like Danielle says, yes, but you should write it while you're writing the essay. Like, I'm not sure what you mean by before or after writing the essay. Okay. I would say what you really need to do is you need to write your essay, and your thesis needs to be written as you write the essay. If you mean, should you like write your body paragraphs and then go back and write your essay? No, please don't. I've seen that before, and I rarely have I seen it where a student can do that and then it makes sense. You can usually tell when it's an afterthought. So I would recommend that you write your thesis as you're writing the essay. And definitely do what Danielle said, pre-write or plan or whatever's going to help you to get your thesis in there. But don't wait until the last minute or until you've written everything else to do your thesis statement. How many points are LEQs, DBQs on the exam? Zach. So somebody's answered that. DBQ 7. Yep. LEQ is 6. If you're meaning like how much do they count towards your grade, DBQ is 25%, LEQ is 15%. Beyond that, it really changes my understanding every year to year, but I can tell you from memory that last year's that was AP Psych, which doesn't matter, so scratch that. 6 and 7, yep. Do you know it's not going to be on the AP Euro exam by chance? David, yeah, I do. You can pretty much, not a hard and fast rule, but I would say 2010 to present day is not going to be asked on the exam. Doesn't mean you can't use it in your essays, but I would be very shocked if it's on the exam. We are told, at least I was, and most of my APSIs, AP Summer Institutes, that it's 10 years before present day is what the exam goes up to. I'm not going to repeat what Dylan said, but sadly, he is also partly correct. So you really, in Euro, stick to European history. Don't go outside of that unless it's the topic itself, all right? If I'm in AP Euro, can I still use non-European events for contextualization, or do they need to be events occurring in Europe? Good answer, Grant. So some of the teachers that are in here, if you are an AP Euro teacher, please chime in on this, because I have not ever heard this from other teachers. But this is what I tell my students, all right? You can have European history without America. So you can never talk about America in AP Euro and you'd be fine, okay? But you cannot have American history without Europe, right? It just wouldn't have developed without Europeans getting here. So I would say it depends on the topic, all right? I don't mean to say that like America as in like the continents, right? Again, I mean like the United States of America. So Europe, if you're in AP Euro, I usually tell my students, hey, stick to European events. You can maybe go into African and Asian events, again, if the topic allows, all right? And you always have the Ottoman Empire, right? They're that bridge between Europe and Asia to help you there, as well as North Africa, if you want to bring in Africa, because they tend to also get part of at least what I teach in the course. Again, other teachers here, what do you say about this? I'd love to know, because this is something I actually question myself every year. How do you organize your docs so you end up with 3 different groups to support your thesis? Sometimes you can't, Nicole, all right? If you can do the 3, that's great. I recommend it. If you can't, that's okay, all right? It's not that hard and fast rule. It's just a good idea. Now, the thing about groups is because there's only 7 documents, if you have a group of 1, you have a group of 1. That's fine, all right? It's making sure that you've analyzed it correctly, you've used it towards your thesis, and you're giving us the relevance of why you're talking about it, all right? Hope that helps, Nicole. Let me know in the comments so I can see. Grace, is it mandatory to write a conclusion? My teacher said what I had to do if we have time. It is not mandatory to write a conclusion, Grace. Your teacher is correct. My caveat to that is, again, the whole thesis issue. You can only get thesis in 2 spots, introduction and conclusion. So if you wrote it in your introduction and you never got to a conclusion and you didn't reword that thesis, what if your thesis in the first part wasn't correct? Or what if your reader didn't understand it? Okay, so that's really going to be a personal choice for you. It's something we practice in my classroom. We practice writing intro, conclusion, body paragraphs, all of it. So, I mean, that's going to be a personal choice for you, okay? Could someone explain the XYZ ABC thing he was talking about? I missed that. Zoe, I will explain it quickly for you. Don't worry. I will go back to that slide for you. This is the XYZ ABC. It's a way to set up what's known as the complex split thesis. Although X, which is known as the counter argument, Y which is going to be your topic, because of A, B, and C, which are the 3 mini things you're going to talk about in your essay. All right. Hopefully that helps you out. I'm going to leave it on the screen for you so you can kind of write that down and keep moving on. Jared, would a counter argument be required in writing the essay? Is it something graders look for? Jared, the counter argument is not required, no, but it helps lead to the complexity point, I think. So I would say do it. It's not, again, it's not something we look for unless it's in the rubric for that year. I'm trying to remember back to last year, and I've slept a lot since then, so I can't. So this is a personal choice, right? On how you want to write your thesis. This is just what I would say, in my opinion, and what I've seen, a really good way for you to get some complexity into the essay to get that unicorn point or get close to the unicorn point, okay? Next, we've got, for the DBQ, how do I effectively incorporate my hits into my paragraphs so that they show that they're relevant to my argument? Let's see what some of the answers are first. Sarah answered you, Ashley. You should first have a topic sentence. That comes from your thesis, right? She said, according to this person thing, and then say the India. So that's a good way to do it. I don't have my students say, according to, and then the author, and then explain it. I just have my students, their main topic sentence is really what should be guiding that paragraph. Okay, so if their main topic sentence is the spread of Judaism in Roman Judea and Samaria, I'm totally trying to bring something up here, was hindered by the Hellenization of Jews, they could then theoretically, like, let's say it was a, genealogy of King Herod. Again, I'm totally pulling this out, guys. You say, if we look at the key, don't use first, second, or third person, right? They could say that the genealogy of King Herod shows that the Hellenization of Judea and Samaria hindered the development of a unique, separate Jewish identity. Okay, they didn't say according to, they didn't say this person or this map or that, but it's still relevant to the topic sentence. So hopefully that helps. Ashley, let me know if it does or it doesn't. Guys, just so you know, I'm going to go for about another 5 minutes because we had a little bit of a hiccup in the beginning, and then I'm going to log off because you guys got to go to bed and I got to go to bed. All right. So I always struggle with the last paragraph of DBQs and LEQs. What tips do you have for wrapping up your paper well? I'm in AP US history. Sorry, that's a great question. Reword, I don't agree with restating. Reword your essay, your thesis. And yes, sum up your, this is what I've talked about, okay? You don't have to relate it to future time periods or where it could lead in the future. I don't think I've seen that in my time as a reader. Some other teachers have, maybe. The teachers, again, if you have, let me know in the comments. But definitely you want to reword your thesis and wrap it up and say, nice, neat little bow, okay? So hopefully that helps you, okay? It's only 8. I don't usually go to bed for another 4 hours. I go to bed in like 30 minutes. I'm old, okay? So I'm going to pick one more thing to answer. So I'm going to go with, I think so. Is there a good way to grade an essay by yourself? Yes. What I would say is don't grade your own essay because you probably are not on purpose going to miss your own mistakes, but it's just going to be that you overlook them on accident because you don't look for the things that a reader would look for. What I would recommend is go to the released student samples, which are on the College Board website, print those out, print out the rubrics, print out the explanation of the scores they got. Grade them based off the rubric and compare your score to what they actually got at the read. If they match, hey, you're doing good. If they don't match, why are they not matching? Okay. Where are you seeing that the reader wasn't, or what did the reader see that you didn't? Okay. So hope that helps, and good luck. Paige, I will answer yours as my final question. All right. So do you get the point if you contextualize the document wrong in the DBQ, but use it towards your argument still? I mean, you have 7 documents, so you don't have to contextualize all 7 or even one of them, actually. Remember, you could do intended audience, you could do purpose, or point of view. What I tell my students, though, is that there are 7 documents. All right, it sounds like a lot, but I promise you, you guys can do this, okay? Hit every single document and put that in your essay. Because if you miss one, you have some cushion. But if you only do the required 4, there's no cushion anymore. And so if you get one wrong, you won't get that point, okay? I hope that helps you, Paige. I also remember, don't double dip. If you put something in your contextualization at the beginning and you try to use that again as a contextualization for a document, cannot do that, okay? So guys, I apologize for the hiccups at the beginning. I don't know what happened. And these slides are available to my knowledge. Tan gave a link out. If not, I will make sure to put a link out. So you guys have a great night. Thank you guys for joining. I know you guys have so many more questions, and I wish I could keep going, but I'm only here for an hour. So have a good night, guys. Good luck, and you guys can do this, okay?